Colonel Rafe Strickland slapped the small blue notebook onto the steel maintenance table, and the sound cracked across the forward staging bay like a starter pistol. 40 Navy SEALs attached to the Joint Task Force turned beneath the white work lights as brass casings rolled from a nearby test bench with a bright metallic clatter. Outside, sand hissed against the reinforced walls, carrying the bitter smell of burned propellant through the open vehicle doors. Planning to repair the war with a pencil, Sergeant? Strickland asked. Staff Sergeant Elara Winslow was new to the task force, not new to the Army, but that distinction meant nothing to the men calling her the rookie mechanic. Her pale hands rested beside a disassembled long-range optic, each screw arranged by size on a clean canvas mat. Morrow, the dark-coated military working dog at her left knee, ignored the laughter and stared toward the eastern mouth of Vesper Rift Valley. Elara did not blink. Strickland opened the notebook with 2 fingers, as though handling something beneath his rank. The pages held columns of air density, basalt temperature, barometric drift, wind direction, and brief time-stamped observations written in compact block letters. Near the bottom of one page, Elara had recorded 3 instances when Morrow reacted to high-frequency coil noise seconds before the command electronics flickered. A mechanic's diary, Strickland said. A few operators smiled because the colonel was watching them. One sniper leaned against an equipment case, but his expression tightened when he saw the ballistic formulas filling the margins. Morrow's nose lifted toward the dusty air, and a low vibration moved through his chest beneath the whistle of the sandstorm. Something was changing. Strickland flipped to another page and read aloud, exaggerating each word for the team. Crosswind instability. Thermal inversion. Possible hidden transmitter. He looked at Elara's armament patch, then at the rifle parts spread across her station, reducing her in a single glance to the lowest visible job in the bay. You calibrate optics, Sergeant. You do not forecast battles. Elara watched a loose strip of range tape twitch toward the valley, fall still, then pull in the opposite direction. She smelled hot metal from the test rifles, hydraulic fluid from the parked helicopters, and the faint mineral scent that arrived when wind scraped across sun-baked basalt. Morrow shifted his weight without taking his eyes from the eastern ridge. 11 seconds later, the handheld weather meter changed direction. Elara reached for the notebook. Strickland closed the notebook, slid it toward the edge of the table, and ordered the operations officer to remove Winslow from the mission brief. When Elara reached for it, Strickland swept the notebook onto the concrete and signed the gesture with a formal order restricting her to maintenance duty. Stay with your tools. The notebook landed open, its blue cover scraping beneath the edge of a rifle crate. Elara crouched, picked it up, and brushed away the gray dust with one slow movement. Her face remained cold, untouched by the colonel's smile or the eyes of the men preparing to enter the valley. Humiliation was noise, data was signal. She returned to the maintenance table and checked the elevation turret on the long-range optic. The rifle it belonged to was locked inside a sealed transit case, marked for depot return, yet Elara had already measured its chamber where muzzle velocity and cold bore deviation. She wrote one final figure beneath the weather notes: 3,517 meters. Across the bay, Strickland briefed the assault force on a route through the dry river channel at the center of Vesper Rift Valley. On the tactical display, the withdrawal corridor appeared clear, but Morrow's ears pinned toward the command vehicle when a high-frequency coil whined rose briefly from its electronics bay. Elara compared the displayed coordinates with the grid numbers she had copied at 0430. 2 digits had been changed. No one else noticed. She closed the notebook, slid it into her chest pocket, and looked past the departing operators toward 13 dark shells of basalt hidden behind blowing sand. The map is wrong, she said quietly. Morrow growled at the valley. Elara added one last line without emotion. Someone was waiting for them. Elara stepped away from the maintenance table before the assault column reached the vehicle line, her blue notebook already open to the altered grid coordinates. The tactical display showed the dry river channel as a clean withdrawal route, but the contour intervals narrowed into a stone funnel beneath 2 elevated basalt shelves. Morrow's nose tracked east, then south, then east again as a faint ozone scent drifted through the burned propellant haze. Those coordinates were changed. She moved beside the command vehicle and placed the original grid beside the mission overlay, aligning both pages under the red map light. The first coordinate differed by 2 digits, shifting the entry 640 meters deeper into the channel, while the second placed the extraction marker beneath a ridge with direct sight lines from 13 concealed firing positions. Outside the bay, the sandstorm whistled through antenna cables, and loose brass clicked across the concrete with every gust. "Sir, the route is compromised," Elara said. Strickland turned slowly from the hood-mounted display, irritation tightening his jaw before he even examined her evidence. Elara showed him the atmospheric column in her notebook. Crosswind at 14.7 knots near ground level, reversal to 8.3 knots above the first shelf, humidity at 19%, and a thermal rise of 2.3 degrees across the eastern wall. Those conditions would distort laser ranging, shift long-distance impacts, and conceal movement inside the dust plume. "You are reading weather, not intent," Strickland said. Morrow moved forward 1 pace and froze, ears angled toward the valley as the smell of heated insulation reached him seconds before the electronic countermeasure panel flickered. Elara checked the time, marked the pulse at 0612 hours, and compared it with 2 earlier spikes recorded before dawn. The intervals were regular enough to suggest a low-power transmitter testing a synchronized network. 13 nodes, she said. Strickland glanced at the dog and smiled without humor. He told the operators nearest the vehicle that the rookie mechanic had promoted herself to intelligence officer and her K-9 to chief of reconnaissance. A few men lowered their eyes instead of laughing, because the numbers on Elara's page were too precise to dismiss comfortably. "Stand down, Sergeant." Elara kept her voice level and requested an 11-minute delay to send a drone over the eastern shelves. She recommended shifting the assault column west by 420 meters, where the basalt walls widened and the thermal layers broke apart. She also warned that the current route would place all 40 troops inside overlapping lines of fire with no lateral exit. "Request denied," Strickland said. He removed the encrypted handset from her vest, handed it to his aide, and ordered her confined to maintenance support until the operation ended. The action was public, deliberate, and meant to reduce her warning to insubordination rather than analysis. Elara wrote the time, the order, the names of 3 witnesses, and Strickland's exact refusal in compact block letters. Documented, the assault vehicles rolled out one by one, diesel exhaust mixing with dust and hot lubricant as tires crossed the steel ramp. Morrow watched the last truck disappear into Vesper Rift Valley, then froze beside the workbench as another high-frequency whine pulsed from the eastern cut. Elara knelt beside him, resting 2 fingers against the case while counting her pulse down from 68 beats per minute to 54. The case held a .375 Chaytak ELR system, firing a 400-grain solid at a verified muzzle velocity of 3,010 feet per second, with a cold bore deviation of 0.17 mil and a projected 3,517-meter flight time of 6.8 seconds. She closed the notebook. Not yet. Then the radio speaker on the command desk crackled once, fell silent, and emitted a burst of static shaped almost like distant gunfire. The second burst came through the speaker with a dry, uneven cadence of automatic fire, followed by a voice buried under static calling for contact on both ridgelines. In the valley, the lead vehicle had just cleared the narrowest point of the river channel when shaped charges split the basalt behind the column and sent black stone crashing across the withdrawal route. Sand roared between the walls, spent casings struck rock with a sharp metallic rain, and the bitter smell of propellant settled over 40 men suddenly trapped inside a corridor built for them. Ambush, east shelf, multiple elevations. Strickland ordered the column forward, but the channel narrowed another 20 meters ahead and exposed the assault force to overlapping fields of fire from the north and south shelves. 13 concealed positions opened in sequence rather than at once, each team firing only long enough to force movement before disappearing behind prepared stone apertures. The electronic countermeasure sets flashed fault codes. Laser rangefinders returned inconsistent distances, and the command net dropped every fourth transmission. Push through the center. The first Special Operations sniper braced behind a fractured axle and ranged a muzzle flash at 1,864 meters. But the reading jumped to 1,931 when heated air rolled off the eastern wall. Ground wind moved west at 16.2 knots, while the dust plume above the channel sheared east at 9.6, creating a crossing layer no handheld meter could resolve. Density altitude had climbed above 8,000 feet, reducing drag through the lower channel. While the rising thermal column introduced vertical dispersion, the firing solution had not captured. Impact left. He corrected 0.8 mil right and fired again, his pulse climbing from 92 to 108 beats per minute as incoming rounds chipped the rock above his cheek. Nearly 3 seconds later, the bullet entered the reversed wind layer and missed the firing slit by more than a meter. A second sniper engaged a target at 2,417 meters, using the last stable laser return before the jammer blanked his optic. He held for a 12.4-knot crosswind, but thermal mirage rising from the basalt shelf distorted the apparent aim point and concealed the upper wind layer. His shot struck stone, and the casing rang against the floor of the channel as the sandstorm screamed through the gap. No connection. At the maintenance bay, Elara listened to the broken calls and drew 13 marks across a sketch of the valley. Morrow paced once toward the eastern doors, stopped, then angled his head toward a high-frequency coil whine that preceded every coordinated burst by 3 seconds. Elara measured the interval, compared it with the timestamps in her notebook, and identified a control rhythm linking the positions through a relay beyond the visible ridge. One network. Strickland continued ordering fire by the original grid, forcing his snipers to engage false positions while the real teams shifted between basalt cuts. Ammunition counters dropped. One vehicle lost its turret power, and medics dragged 2 wounded operators beneath a shallow overhang that would not hold if the enemy gained another elevation. The assault force had no clear lane backward, no reliable drone feed, and no air support through the dust ceiling. 7 minutes, 19 seconds, Elara said. She had calculated the time from the enemy's movement pattern, the remaining ammunition, and the rate at which the outer teams were closing the channel. Morrow froze beside the sealed rifle case, ears pinned toward the high-frequency whine pulsing from the eastern cut. Elara opened her notebook to a clean page and wrote, 3,517 meters, 14.7 knots at ground level, 19% humidity, 6.8 seconds of flight, and a firing pulse of 48 beats per minute. On the radio, the senior sniper's voice finally broke through the static. We cannot see the control point. Elara unlocked the case. You do not need to see it yet. Elara broke the seal on the transit case, lifted the long-range rifle onto the maintenance bench, and checked the chamber with one controlled pull of the bolt. Sand hissed through the open bay doors while the radio carried clipped reports of dwindling ammunition, shattered optics, and enemy fire stepping closer to the trap formation. Morrow stood beside her, with his nose pointed toward the eastern ridge, tracking pressure changes that the weather station registered only after they had passed. Give me the relay cycle. She mounted the optic, confirmed the cold bore deviation at 0.17 mil, and laid the blue notebook beside the stock. The target zone sat 3,517 meters away, 286 meters above her position, behind a basalt seam that exposed the controller for less than 2 seconds every 19-second cycle. Ground wind held at 14.7 knots from the west. The middle layer reversed at 8.3 knots, and the upper thermal stream pushed south at 5.6. Strickland's voice cut through the maintenance bay's hardwired emergency speaker. You are confined to support. Elara ignored the order and wrote the remaining corrections in compact figures. 6.8 seconds of flight, 0.08 mil of aerodynamic jump, and 0.32 mil of right-hand spin drift. At 34 degrees north on an east-northeast azimuth, Coriolis added another 0.19 mil right. Moro's right ear moved first, then his left, then both flattened as the wind folded through the eastern cut. 11 seconds later, the digital vein confirmed the same reversal. Machines report history. She settled behind the rifle, placed the stock into her shoulder, and watched the dust instead of the ridge. A thin break in the storm revealed the edge of a transmitter mast, then vanished beneath another sheet of sand. Her breathing slowed from 6 cycles per minute to 4, and her pulse dropped from 54 beats per minute to 48. "Stand down now, Sergeant." Elara held on the fixed relay housing, solving for 6.8 seconds of flight and the final wind reversal over the eastern shelf. The Earth's rotation would carry the projectile fractionally right. The falling temperature would increase density near the far shelf, and the final crosswind would push the round back toward center. She dialed the verified elevation from her dope card and held 2.14 mils into the crosswind, offset from the relay housing. "No miracles." Moro froze. Elara exhaled halfway, waited for the pressure wave between heartbeats, and pressed the trigger during the 0.8-second still point. The rifle drove into her shoulder. The report rolled across the staging bay, and the brass casing struck concrete with a clean metallic ring. For 6.8 seconds, the valley remained unchanged. Then the round struck the relay housing. The network collapsed, and 13 firing positions lost their synchronized command cycle. Relay down. Elara cycled the bolt and shifted to the secondary jammer at 2,986 meters. Wind had risen to 16.1 knots at ground level, but dropped to 7.9 across the upper shelf, forcing a 0.46 mil correction from her original table. She fired the first follow-up round at the secondary jammer, cycled the bolt, and shifted to the backup antenna. Nearly 6 seconds after the first trigger break, the jammer housing failed and the guard circuit cleared. The second round arrived moments later and severed the antenna before it could assume control. Backups down. She did not hunt individual fighters. She dismantled the network, holding the 40 men in place. Deprived of centralized timing, the 13 positions began transmitting over one another and firing without coordinated sectors. Elara keyed the hardwired guard circuit once. Relay down. Western cut. Move now. The senior sniper in the channel understood first and ordered the trap force through a narrow western cut. Strickland tried to redirect them toward the original route, but nobody followed his command. For 47 seconds, the destroyed relay denied the ambushers coordinated fire, while Elara's 2 follow-up shots kept the backup. Equipment offline. The last operator cleared the kill corridor as the eastern shelf disappeared behind the storm. Elara lowered the rifle and looked through the settling dust at the ruined relay site. Beside it sat a weapons crate stamped with a depot code she had seen in Strickland's own inventory ledger. That was not an enemy shipment. The sand had not settled when Elara slung the rifle, secured the bolt, and moved toward the western cut with Moro ranging 3 paces ahead. Residual wind crossed the valley floor at 12.8 knots. Humidity held at 18%, and the ruined relay site remained 3,517 meters behind her beneath a column of black electrical smoke. Her pulse rose only from 48 to 56 beats per minute as she descended into the channel, where spent brass clicked beneath her boots. Find a signal. Moro ignored the returning operators and tracked a thin ozone trail toward a fractured shelf below the relay position. The 40-man assault force regrouped behind basalt cover, exhausted but intact, while medics treated cuts, blast injuries, and 2 non-critical gunshot wounds. Above them, the last hostile teams withdrew through the storm without coordinated fire, their abandoned apertures revealing military-grade optics and ammunition cans with U.S. depot markings. "Those crates came through our supply chain," Elara said. She photographed the first serial plate, recorded its location, and compared it with a sequence copied in her blue notebook during an inventory inspection 6 weeks earlier. The crate had been listed as destroyed after moisture contamination, yet its seal was unbroken and its contents had armed the ambush. Moro stopped beside a flat stone and scratched once, exposing a low-power transmitter wrapped in thermal cloth. Evidence. Elara connected the memory core to a right-blocked field reader, generated a forensic hash, transmitted that hash to the oversight cell, and sealed the original in a tamper-evident pouch witnessed by 2 operators. The field reader exposed only transmission metadata, but the 19-second burst intervals matched the relay rhythm she had recorded before the 3,517-meter shot. The oversight cell would later decrypt the core and recover the assault route, departure window, and emergency frequencies. Someone gave them the mission package. Strickland arrived with 4 armed aides and ordered everyone away from the relay site. Dust coated his uniform, but his voice carried the same certainty he had used in the staging bay, as though rank could erase the geometry of the trap. He seized 1 ammunition ledger, claimed the markings were fabricated, and directed an aide to collect every electronic device for command review. "This site falls under my authority." Elara watched him step directly toward the transmitter before anyone had told him where it was buried. Morrow's shoulders stiffened, and a low warning rolled from his chest when Strickland reached for the sealed evidence pouch in Elara's hand. Elara closed her fingers around the pouch's tamper strip and noted that the colonel had recognized the device model without examining the sealed casing. "You knew what to look for." Strickland ordered her rifle confiscated, her access suspended, and her field notes surrendered under operational security procedures. Elara handed over the weapon after recording its round count, cold bore correction, and final chamber condition, but the blue notebook remained inside a reinforced pouch beneath Morrow's harness. Her pulse settled from 56 to 51 as Strickland's aides destroyed a damaged transmitter and removed 2 marked crates before independent investigators could arrive. "Weapons accountability," he said. Elara reviewed the authenticated transmission header and found a signing certificate fingerprint embedded in the metadata. The fingerprint matched a cryptographic credential assigned exclusively to Strickland's command office. A separate cross-check showed that every soldier in the trapped unit had signed or witnessed discrepancies involving missing optics, ammunition, or serialized weapons during the previous 4 months. The ambush had not been designed merely to defeat a patrol. It had been designed to erase 40 witnesses and convert their deaths into an intelligence failure. This was cleanup. On the flight back to base, rotor vibration shuddered through the cabin, while burned powder, hydraulic fluid, and desert dust clung to every uniform. Strickland sat opposite Elara and drafted his official account before the aircraft cleared Vesper Rift Valley, accusing her of disobeying orders, compromising the operation, and firing an unauthorized strategic weapon. He leaned close enough that only she and Morrow could hear him. "Out there, Sergeant. I still write the report." Elara looked at the blue notebook hidden beneath Morrow's harness, then at the colonel's shaking pen. "You write reports," she said. "A record time." 12 days after the Vesper Rift operation, Elara entered a secured Article 32 preliminary hearing in a clean service uniform. The hearing room had no windows, only a long walnut table, a wall-mounted flag, and the steady hum of an air-conditioning vent calibrated too cold for comfort. She sat beside cleared defense counsel before a single field-grade preliminary hearing officer, while Morrow waited behind a secured door under military police supervision. Colonel Rafe Strickland remained outside under a witness sequestration order until called to testify under oath. The preliminary hearing officer summarized the preferred charges: direct disobedience of a lawful order, unauthorized use of a restricted long-range weapon, interference with the chain of command, removal of controlled evidence, and falsification of battlefield reporting. Elara's pulse remained at 52 beats per minute. "Understood," she said. When called, Strickland entered alone, took the witness seat, and testified under oath that the ambush had been an unpredictable enemy action and the escape the result of his rapid maneuver orders. He called Elara's 3,517-meter engagement reckless, claimed the wind had been no stronger than 6 knots, and said the shot's success could not be reproduced under control conditions. The official weather summary entered by his staff listed humidity at 31% and omitted every thermal reversal recorded before the assault. It was luck. Elara studied the report without changing expression. Her notebook data showed 14.7 knots at ground level, 8.3 knots in reverse flow above the first shelf, 19% humidity, a 2.3-degree thermal rise, and a 6.8-second flight time. Her firing pulse had fallen from 54 to 48 beats per minute before the first shot, and the cold bore deviation had been logged at 0.17 mil before the rifle left its sealed case. Luck does not produce repeatable corrections. The government counsel asked whether she had received a direct order to stand down. Elara answered yes, then requested that the exact time of the order be compared with the timestamp of the first coordinated enemy transmission. The preliminary hearing officer reviewed the government exhibit list and found no authenticated copy of the raw command traffic, only Strickland's written summary. Where is the original traffic? Strickland replied that the files had been corrupted by electronic interference inside the valley. He then produced a second map showing that Elara's warning had never been entered into the command system. The three officers who had heard Elara's warning were listed as witnesses under the sequestration order, and each had already provided a sworn statement confirming the time and wording of her report. Strickland looked toward the preliminary hearing officer. No formal warning existed. Elara asked whether verbal warnings issued in front of witnesses ceased to exist because a commander refused to log them. She requested the chain of custody form for the relay memory core, the destruction authorization for the marked weapons crates, and the armory record showing why a rifle scheduled for depot return had remained combat-ready. Each request exposed another missing document. Record the absence. Strickland's composure narrowed into irritation. He accused Elara of constructing technical distractions to hide insubordination and claimed her empty service file proved she lacked operational authority. Her visible record listed maintenance schools, depot assignments, and K-9 support certification, with no sniper qualification, combat awards, or special access history available to the preliminary hearing officer. She is a mechanic who wanted a legend. Elara stated that an order lost its presumption of lawfulness when it was issued to conceal misconduct, destroy witnesses, or obstruct an authorized investigation. She said a command designed to place 40 troops inside overlapping fire from 13 prepared positions could not be shielded by volume, rank, or a rewritten report. Her voice stayed level enough that the vent seemed louder than she was. A louder order is not a truer one. The preliminary hearing officer leaned forward and asked whether she regretted firing. Elara answered that she regretted losing 47 seconds, proving what should have been accepted 11 minutes earlier. Strickland smiled as though the answer had sealed her fate. The preliminary hearing officer paused the proceeding when the secured door opened. Morrow lifted his head in the hallway, and the officers in the room rose as a four-star general entered under a classified access authorization, carrying a folder blacked out across nearly every page. The four-star general set the redacted folder on the walnut table, and the room fell silent except for the air vent and the faint click of Morrow's nails beyond the secured doorway. General Malcolm Thorne removed his cap, faced the preliminary hearing officer, and authorized a compartmented disclosure under emergency oversight authority. 90% of the file had been blacked out, but one line remained visible beneath Elara's photograph. Quiet axiom. Staff Sergeant Winslow's assignment was never depot maintenance. Thorne turned the first page and revealed the designation Black Meridian Initiative, followed by mission dates, operational locations, and engagement records reduced to strips of black ink. Attached to the redacted service file was a provisional ballistic validation sheet from the current operation. 3,517 meters, layered winds beginning at 14.7 knots, 6.8 seconds of flight, and a firing pulse reduced from 54 to 48 beats per minute. Another surviving entry described her deployment standard in a single sentence: employ only when conventional solutions have failed. She was the contingency. Strickland rose and objected that classified service history did not excuse disobedience. Thorne told him to sit, then ordered the military police officer outside to bring Morrow into the room. A military police evidence custodian entered with Morrow and a sealed pouch recovered from his harness, its tamper strip signed by 2 surviving operators. At the preliminary hearing officer's direction, The custodian broke the seal and handed the blue notebook to Elara for identification. She placed it beside the altered route maps. The first pages contained atmospheric observations, wind reversals, high-frequency coil noise, equipment flicker, and the exact moment Strickland rejected an 11-minute delay. Later pages recorded the 13 hostile positions, the 2.3-degree thermal rise, the 0.17 mil cold bore deviation, and every correction used during the shot that opened the escape corridor. Numbers do not change rank. She turned to a section marked with depot codes and command timestamps. Each missing weapons crate matched a shipment Strickland's office had certified as damaged, destroyed, or transferred beyond service use. The notebook preserved the forensic hash, signing certificate fingerprint, recovery time, and grid coordinate of the relay memory core, along with the minute Strickland's aide removed the first crate and the second his team destroyed the transmitter. That certificate fingerprint matches the credential assigned exclusively to your command office, Thorne said. Strickland claimed the notebook was personal material without evidentiary standing, but Elara identified 3 witnesses for every verbal order, 2 independent sensor logs for each equipment anomaly, and serial numbers that match the Armory database. Thorne added the recovered relay data, showing that the assault route, emergency frequencies, and departure window had been transmitted before the convoy entered Vesper Rift Valley. The ambush was supplied from inside this command. The preliminary hearing officer reviewed the witness list and found that all 40 members of the trapped unit had previously signed or witnessed discrepancy reports involving missing optics, ammunition, or serialized weapons. Their deaths would have erased the only connected chain of testimony. Strickland's face lost color. This was not battlefield error, Elara said. It was evidence removal. Acting as the general court-martial convening authority, Thorne directed that the preferred charges against Elara not be referred and dismissed them without prejudice. He then referred the evidence against Strickland to CID and the staff judge advocate for investigation under the UCMJ. CID agents apprehended Strickland on probable cause and secured his wrists without force. Before any questioning began, they advised him of his Article 31B rights. No one raised a voice. "You cannot prove intent," Strickland said. Elara opened the notebook to the page recording his first inspection of the altered map, his refusal to verify it, and his immediate recognition of the buried transmitter model. Beneath the entry sat one final notation. He knew where the evidence was before anyone showed him. Intent leaves a pattern. As the officers escorted Strickland toward the door, Thorne looked at Elara and asked when she first understood that the colonel had betrayed his own team. She rested one hand on Morrow's harness and closed the blue notebook. "When the data said one thing," she replied, and he ordered everyone to believe another. The door closed behind Strickland, and the hearing room remained silent long enough for the air vent to become the loudest sound in the building. 3 days after the hearing, General Malcolm Thorne signed the formal disposition dismissing the preferred charges against Elara. A forensic copy of the blue notebook entered the protected record, while the authenticated original was released to her after every page had been photographed, logged, and digitally sealed. A clear ballistic review team verified the 3,517-meter engagement, the layered winds beginning at 14.7 knots, the 6.8-second flight time, and the rifle's documented 0.17 mil cold bore deviation. The review concluded that one precise shot had broken the relay, controlling 13 hostile positions. All 40 operators survived, Thorne said. Elara accepted the statement without visible relief, because she had already counted every man as they cleared the western cut. The final medical report listed no fatalities, 2 non-life-threatening gunshot wounds, several blast injuries, and all 40 personnel returned alive from a corridor designed to erase them. Her blue notebook had not merely calculated the shot. Its timestamps, coordinates, serial numbers, and command refusals had preserved the truth long enough for military law to act. The record is corrected. Thorne offered her a classified commendation and formal restoration to operational status, but Elara asked for neither ceremony nor announcement. She requested only that the after-action records for all 40 operators reflect what had actually happened, and that Morrow remain assigned to her without interruption. The general studied her for a moment, then approved both requests. Quiet Axiom remains compartmented. Near midnight, Elara crossed the maintenance hangar wearing the same style of grease-marked utility uniform Strickland had once mocked. The long-range rifle had been secured, the altered maps were sealed as evidence, and the blue notebook rested inside the front pocket of her field jacket. Morrow walked at her left side, his ears moving toward the dark runway where warm desert air met the colder wind descending from mountains. Time to move. The 40 operators from Vesper Rift Valley were waiting in 2 straight ranks on the flight line beyond the hangar doors. Lieutenant Commander Nolan Mercer, the senior SEAL sniper whose voice had carried the words "no correction" through the valley, stood at the head of the formation with his injured arm secured against his chest. These were the same men who had watched Strickland drop Elara's notebook onto the concrete. The same specialists who had entered the valley believing a mechanic's warning carried less weight than a colonel's confidence. Now each man knew exactly what 3,517 meters meant. Attention! 40 sets of boots struck the concrete flight line in one unified movement. The other 39 operators remained at attention as Lieutenant Commander Mercer stepped forward and raised one deliberate, unofficial salute on behalf of the team. There was no applause, no celebration, and no spoken apology. The gesture was not for a medal, a rank, or a file almost entirely covered in black ink. It was for the small woman who had remained at the rifle while their best optics failed, reduced her pulse to 48 beats per minute, trusted the K9 that detected pressure shifts, heated insulation, and high-frequency coil noise before the instruments confirmed them, and opened a 47-second path through 13 coordinated firing positions. Elara stopped before the formation. Her face remained calm, almost unreadable, as she offered no speech about forgiveness or recognition. Elara came to attention, held Mercer's gaze, and answered the unofficial salute with one precise nod. Then she continued toward the dark transport aircraft beyond the hangar. Morrow followed without looking back. Lieutenant Commander Mercer called after her, asking what real strength looked like when nobody was watching. Elara adjusted the strap of her backpack and kept walking. Real strength does not require witnesses, she said. It only requires the truth to survive them. The aircraft door closed behind her. The runway lights narrowed beneath its wings, and the 40 men remained at attention until the transport disappeared into the night. By morning, the rookie mechanic's workbench was empty except for one clean rectangle in the dust where the blue notebook had rested. If you respect the silent courage and impossible skills of these undercover heroes, please hit the like button, leave a comment, and subscribe to our channel for more stories. This story is a fictional military narrative created for entertainment, reflection, and educational purposes. Any resemblance to real people, places, or events is purely coincidental.